Hi, we are students from City of Armagh High School, and today we are going to tell you all about the Catch My Pal movement that originated with a lamppost on this street. Let's head over to Armagh County Museum where Sasha will be interviewing Sean, a local historian, to tell us some more information. Sean, can you tell me about the Catch My Pal movement?
The Catch My Pal movement is actually just over 100 years old. It was founded in 1909 by a local Presbyterian minister called the Reverend Patterson, and he really went on a crusade to try and stop people who he thought were abusing alcohol and drinking too much in and around the town.
How did the movement start?
The Catch My Pal movement started in one of the 7 houses, which was actually the Presbyterian manse. That's the residence of the local Presbyterian minister, the Reverend Patterson, and he gathered together a few choice men who he thought would be good, I suppose, advocates for his cause in getting this movement up and going.
Are the 7 houses famous?
Well, as a matter of fact, the one that the Reverend Patterson lived in is quite well known, principally because of his work with the Catch My Pal movement, and he has been recognised so much for this that probably at the end of this year, the start of next year, a blue plaque will be erected on the Presbyterian Church to commemorate his good work in the temperance movement.
Can you tell me about the lamppost?
Well, I suppose the lamppost was a pivotal starting point for the whole Catch My Pal movement, because it was around it that Patterson saw, probably from his drawing room window, a group of men assembled one evening that more or less had a bit too much to drink, and that spurred him on to start the movement. So much did the movement take off that the Reverend Patterson actually, a couple of years after, in 1912, the movement started, wrote a book about his whole journey in this temperance movement, and he illustrated it quite nicely with crucial photographs from the history of it. And here we see a photograph of the famous lamppost at the junction of Abbey Street and English Street.
Why did the people fear touching the lamppost outside the Reverend Patterson's house?
I don't think anybody was ever afraid of touching the lamppost outside the Reverend Patterson's house. The Reverend Patterson was extremely good at self-publicity, really good at slogans. And so whenever he would have a rally or do a talk, or in his book, he would continually say that the people in Armagh were afraid to touch this lamppost in case they got the infection, and the infection would stop them from drinking. But this was just his way of publicising his movement.
The Reverend Patterson sounds like he was very bossy and old-fashioned. Was he?
No, I think today we would tend to assume that anybody who wanted to stop people from drinking or to stop people from doing anything must be very bossy and must be very old-fashioned. But at the start of the 20th century, the ministers who were trying to stop people drinking were against old-fashioned ideas, and they wanted society to get with it and to listen to science and to become much more modern and much more caring. So he was the opposite of old-fashioned. He was very much wanting people to move forward. Well, one way that the Reverend Patterson was against old-fashioned ideas in that he believed that women should get the vote. And you have to remember, when he was writing this book in 1912, a suffragette, a woman who wanted women to get the vote, had thrown a hatchet at the head of the Prime Minister when he was visiting Dublin. So he was somebody who was prepared to come out and to say, no, it would be a good idea for women to get the vote. This would be better for society. In fact, it might stop men from drinking if women had more say in society. So he was forward-thinking, certainly in that regard, and in wanting more technology, cinema, telephones. He was very much against old-fashioned ideas.
R.J. Patterson was a very charismatic person. People liked him. He was a remarkable speaker. He could speak very, very well, and his ability to speak and sway crowds and persuade people was the most important factor in the growth of Catch My Pal. He was from Newton-Hamilton, between Newton-Hamilton and Whitecross. He had grown up in Bray in County Wicklow. He'd gone to Trinity College in Dublin. He was a very clever person. He did very well at university, and he was called to Third Armagh, which was a very large church for a man of his age and experience to go to as his first charge. He was successful there, he was happy there, but he was also very interested in doing something for the wider church, and that's where Catch My Pal came in.
Why did he give out buttons?
The button was a marketing tool. He didn't give them away, they sold them. They had to buy them, because whenever you buy something, it's yours in a way that something that's given to you isn't. And it was a way of people demonstrating an understanding that they belong to an organisation. Men like belonging to organisations. We like ritual, it's part of part of what we are, and Paterson understood this. Whenever you saw someone else wearing a button, then you knew you were a pal of that person, that you belonged to the same organisation, that you had a common cause. And the idea of the common cause was really important. So the button was a totem, a symbol of the movement, and a symbol of people belonging to it.
Why was the Catch My Pal movement so successful?
The Catch My Pal movement was successful because the Reverend Paterson realised it wasn't about telling people what they couldn't do. You had to give them an alternative. So he made sure that there were, for example, shooting clubs in Portadown were started up. There were trips organised in places like Londonderry. So it was giving people an alternative to going to the pubs. And Catch My Pal was also about helping people keep their promise not to drink. And so everybody would wear a little button to identify themselves. And if you had your friends who were trying to help you not to drink and you had alternatives to drinking, that seemed to stop people in country areas where these movements were really successful in country areas. That's why this movement took off and did well in Northern Ireland.